So, Berta, let me tell you a story about a client that I had many, many years ago. It was a very informative client to me about what heroin is and what Percocet is, what Vicodin is, all these kinds of pills. I'd heard about it, but didn't really know much about it in terms of people abusing the substances. You know, I'd seen movies about heroin addiction, but I was like, well, you know, I don't even really know what it does to people.
Right.
I had a client who came to me, and he had a long history of problems with pills and with heroin, and his story was thus. He had a violent father and was traumatized a lot growing up, and you know, lived a pretty typical life in Seattle and had a typical job and typical friends and typical kind of lifestyle, but chronically not feeling so good, but, you know, getting by.
Like in their 20s, 30s?
Yeah, 20s.
20s.
And early 20s.
Okay.
And he goes in to have a procedure done medically, and they give him pain pills to, you know, deal with the pain post-surgery. He takes the pills, and immediately upon returning home, because they tell him, like, you're going to be in a lot of pain.
Right.
So make sure you take a really good dose when you get home, because it's going to be a lot of pain.
Don't skip it.
So he goes home, and he's kind of miserable with the pain, but he takes the big dose, and for the very first time in his life, he feels okay.
Wow.
He feels normal. He doesn't have those racing thoughts. He doesn't have those intrusive thoughts of shame and what's wrong with you, or everyone hates you. You know, suddenly he's just cool as a cucumber. And he suddenly realizes, like when your water in your ear suddenly pops out, right?
Yeah.
Like
you can hear.
Yeah. Oh, this is what hearing is like. I've been dealing with this clogged ear this whole time. This is what it's like to actually feel normal. And he said that. He said, for the first time, I felt like I felt the way everyone else looked. Everyone else looked like they were fine.
Right.
Everyone else acted like their life was going okay, like they weren't constantly struggling with self-esteem or shame or psychological pain from the past, or, you know, PTSD-like symptoms and distress and like spikes in anger and you know, deep insecurities. First time he felt fine. All those feelings were gone. And he immediately thought, I need to be on these pills all the time. There's just really no other alternative. And he might have, I don't remember, but he might have even been to therapy before, and that didn't help. He might have even been on other psychotropics like, you know, SSRIs, and they didn't help. So then he starts to seek medication. So he slowly figures, pre-internet, so he's slowly kind of figuring out, well, if I report I'm in pain, then I get more pills. And this is in the time when, in the 90s, when they were just passing out these pills like candy, like we saw in the documentary, which we'll talk about in a second. Then he discovers that over time, he needs more of these pills to feel any kind of an effect. And maybe there's a time there where he can't get any pills, and he realizes how crappy he feels. I mean, just utter, you know, so many symptoms from withdrawal that he experienced when he couldn't get his hands on him. So he starts to go further afield, starts to search for physicians and prescribers that are outside of Seattle, and is really anxious. And pretty much, even though he's working, his whole mental life is dominated by making sure that he stays on top. Yeah. Then he is somehow he finds out that heroin is a similar substance to the pills that he's taking, and is a lot easier to get. You can buy the pills illegally, but heroin is easy to find and cheaper. And so he's like, okay, takes heroin, doesn't want to shoot it at first, but eventually starts to shoot it because that's much, you know, quicker and more effective administration of the substance. And again, his tolerance is going up. He needs more and more, and he's spending more and more of his money. Now, you know, half of his paycheck is going towards it. 75% of his paycheck is going towards it. And he's like, okay, I got to stop. He tries to stop. It doesn't work. He tries to go to drug treatment, and, NA, none of that works. It's so powerful. Not only the withdrawal symptoms, but also the feeling of his trauma symptoms from his childhood cropping up when he is without the substance.
Yeah, it's a double whammy.
Yeah, he might experience some sustained periods of sobriety and abstinence, but maybe he's like, okay, I'm just going to smoke a lot of weed, or I'm going to drink alcohol, but it doesn't really work the same way. And he finds himself needing more and more of the substance. Maybe he loses his job. I don't know. And then he turns to crime. He starts
to try to get money.
So at first it's petty things like shoplifting, bringing stuff in, because back then you could steal stuff from Nordstrom, walk back in and just, without a receipt, because Nordstrom had this really good customer service that they didn't ask any question. They just gave you cash.
And basically I could see someone like mentally justifying that. Like, well, I'm returning the item.
Yeah. And it's Nordstrom. It's a giant company.
Yeah.
And
they can do without this little bit of money.
Right. They seem to be doing okay.
Yeah.
The shareholders are doing okay. And then it starts to escalate from there to, car break-ins, and eventually to some severe crimes, which I won't go into to, avoid identifying this person. But some pretty severe crimes to get a lot of money in order to sustain this habit for him. All the while, he hates himself.
Of course.
At no point in this process is he like, yay,
right,
this is the life. This is like a rapper video or a gangster movie in which there's, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. There's none of that. It's shame. It's, trying to survive minute by minute, running from the law, terrified.
This isn't like his family, is in business with the mob, so he grew up in it and grew up around it, and his uncles and cousins are in it. No, he just did this because he needs the money for the drug.
Right. And all the time, just, people start asking questions. He goes into denial. He has a very, he kind of pushes himself into the background and doesn't really think about it because he can't. Because as soon as he starts thinking about it, then he starts to question it, and he can't because he doesn't see any way out physically or psychologically. And eventually he gets caught. His crime spree went on for a while, and he pretty much knew he was going to get caught. He turned himself in, actually. And he is convicted, goes into prison, goes through withdrawal symptoms, which is really rough for him. Yeah, I think he gets some medical help with that. And as he's going into prison, he's actually happy because
this is a forced
sobriety. Yeah. And he's thinking, I don't, how many years I got to spend in here? 5 years, 10 years. And after that time, I'll get out and I'll be sober, and then I'll get my life back on track the way it was before.
Yeah.
And
someone in the documentary said something like that, like, I'm going to jail, and either I'll get clean or I'll die, and I'm okay with either.
Right. Well, either is better than what's happening. So this is just one story of opiate or opioid abuse, and there are many, and we'll get into them because I have a surprising, I know more people who have died from heroin or opioids than have died from COVID.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Like, do you know anyone who's died from COVID personally?
Personally, I don't know. I know a lot of people have caught it, and several have been very sick, but I don't know if any of them have died.
Yeah, I don't know anyone who's died personally. Yeah. And I don't even know that many who have gotten it. Everyone in my circle has been extremely...
I do know a lot that's got it. A lot in Colombia, and a lot, like a lot of people initially caught it in the area that were coworkers or family members of coworkers.
Yeah. I think I only know like one person out of dozens of people that I know.
Yeah.
And maybe other people got it. They didn't know they got it. But anyway. So, and I think that's just reflective of how politically leaning and privileged my circle is, right? Because if you have to work in a restaurant. But anyway, my point is that I know a lot more people who have died from personally, including clients who have died from heroin and opioids than I have from
I was
COVID.
just talking to one of my best friends in Colombia. He caught COVID. He recovered, but he has now smell dyslexia, where he'll grab an orange and it'll smell like something else to him. And it's getting
like
worse. What? He was giving me an example. I forget what he said, but it was like an orange will smell like an eraser or something. You know, it was like totally different smells. And the doctor was telling him that he needs to work on retraining his brain. It's horrible.
It like destroyed nerves or something?
I don't understand the mechanisms, but it has, for some people, it has long-term lasting effects.
Right.
All sorts.
Right. Fatigue, breathing problems.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's get into it. You know, the reason why I wanted to talk about this is because we watched a documentary on HBO called The Crime of the Century, which I highly recommend people watch, especially the first episode. But let's get into it. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist, and I'm also a professor.
My name is Humberto Castañeda. I grow organic poppy fields to see if I can put robots to sleep as well.
No, you don't. So what is a opioid, Berto?
An opioid is, as I understand it, a chemical compound derived from, I think it's from poppy seeds and maybe synthetic versions, that seems to go for specific receptors in our brains, I guess pain areas and other things, and it's very powerful. It can be very addicting. That's about as much as I understand.
Yeah, that's all true. Opioids are the natural and synthetic, compounds. Opiate is the natural compounds like heroin, morphine, codeine, this kind of thing. So if the following medications you might be familiar with, so everyone knows what morphine is, oxycodone, this includes Oxycontin and Percocet. So whenever you hear Percocet or Oxy, that's what people are referring to. Hydrocodone, this is Vicodin, people have heard of that. Oxymorphone, Opana, fentanyl, you have heard, and codeine.
Yeah.
Codeine's the only one that doesn't sound like the rest. You know, all the other ones have a lot of codones and but codeine sounds like caffeine. It sounds like a nice thing. But
having a little codeine.
Yeah. So it is effective in treating acute pain, and it's been used for other things as well, but mainly for treating acute pain. Meaning that, like, I remember I don't know which one of these I was prescribed, but I had my wisdom teeth pulled when I was 19 years old, and they just gave me a prescription for this.
Right.
And I remember taking them and feeling very mellow. I just remember thinking like, whoa.
Right.
I remember almost having like tunnel vision, mellow, like really mellow.
Weird.
Like probably not good mellow.
Yeah.
Have you ever taken one of these before?
So for my operation that I had recently for my thyroidectomy.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know what they gave me while they were putting me under, doing the operation. Maybe I was on an opiate. I don't know. But after the operation, they prescribed me oxycodone, whatever it's called, and Tylenol. And they said, look, start with the Tylenol, but you're probably going to want to take this one. You know, pain's going to be really bad. Now, I hate taking things. I mean, I like to not take things as much as I can. Even Tylenol, I just don't like taking it. And so I set myself to not take it if I could. And I didn't. And luckily I was okay with the Tylenol. I was able to actually titrate down the...
Why don't you want to take it?
I'm afraid, honestly. First of all, even Tylenol has side effects, and let alone these things. I'm afraid to take something like that and then get addicted or whatever. I don't know.
You'd rather have the pain.
I'd rather have the pain. Now, granted, if pain was making my daily life impossible, then that's, you end up having to make these very difficult decisions.
Yeah. Yeah, the documentary made an interesting point that Americans, we consider pain to be bad.
Yeah.
Something to be rid of, something to rid ourselves of, like germs, similar to that, okay, we have too many germs, antibacterial everything, and then now we have all these kids who are allergic to everything. Or wolves are bad, kill them all, and then the ecology falls apart. And with pain, it's complicated. Now, I want to say from the beginning that pain is awful. Chronic pain is a billion times more awful.
Oh, absolutely. Look, I've had only glimpses into this. One time I pulled a neck muscle. This was 2 or 3 years ago or something like that. Maybe it was, I don't know. But at some point I pulled a neck muscle. And that doesn't sound so bad. No, this thing was so bad. I had a constant headache. I couldn't focus on anything. Like, it was just, and this only lasted like 2 or 3 days.
Yeah.
And for those 2 or 3 days, it was miserable.
Yeah, you can't sleep.
No, so I was like, oh my gosh, if someone is dealing with this on a constant basis.
Right. Yeah. And the documentary goes, the main thesis of this documentary, Crime of the Century, is that Big Pharma was marketing and also using illegal practices to push their medications, their pain meds, their opioids, to make billions upon billions of dollars. And it resulted in them knowing that prescribers and patients were abusing the substances, but they didn't care because they were making all this money, and the government was essentially complicit in this whole thing. And people were dying, and then once they couldn't get enough of the prescription drugs, they went to heroin, and then they would die from heroin. And it's been going on for 20, 30 years. Yeah. And there's only been recent pushback, kind of. Yeah. So the documentary was mainly anti-Big Pharma and kind of anti-OxyContin, right? Anti-Percocet, anti-opioid. But I will tell you that the doctor, that one that they kept interviewing, Lynn Webster, I think his name was, or something Webster.
In the first documentary? In the first half?
First episode.
Yeah, I know who you're talking about then. Yeah.
He had that clinic.
Yes. The Life Root or something.
Yes, yeah, right. Life
Tree,
yeah. And he he owned this clinic and was making a lot of money from various different pain treatments, mainly involving lots of meds, which was scandalized by this documentary. But he made actually a good point. He said that, and I'm glad they left it in, he said, look, when someone comes to you and they're suffering from chronic pain and they don't want to live anymore, their life is completely over, essentially. And we have the ability to possibly take away that pain with medication, then we have to, this isn't his exact words, but
no, but
we have to weigh the pros and the cons. We understand that these medications can become addictive. We understand that these medications can cause someone to die. That happens sometimes, but suicide or complete, on a scale from 0 to 10, a zero well-being for the rest of their life, what's the alternative? It's sort of like when someone has a terminal illness and they're like, well, let's do this experimental drug that might cause your fingers to fall off. Some people are just like, fine, let's go for it. I don't want my fingers to fall off, but I if this has a chance of helping me.
Or if there's a vaccine with some side effects, but that can stop, 4 million people dead around the world, and
right. And you have a 1 in 200 million chance of actually having a serious side effect, then the dice are definitely worth rolling. I mean, you literally have to dice. You'd really have to roll like 5,000 dice and get all sixes, essentially. Anyway, that's not true, but something along those lines. So he made that point, and it's true. And that's another point of this documentary that I wish they emphasized a little bit more, which is that when they should have talked to someone that actually wanted the meds, because there wasn't any talk of like, is anyone benefiting from this protocol? Because some do. Some benefit from that protocol.
I like the first half of the documentary a little better, partially because the narrative. Now, look, I don't need it to be balanced. Like, clearly, there's some really bad players in this story. It's just there is that aspect, and I felt that doctor, and maybe he's a really good actor, but he seemed a lot less cynical about all of this than some of the other players.
Yeah.
Because He was like, hey, look, this is my vision. I really do believe this.
Right.
Now, maybe he's lying to himself. I don't know. It's true that once you get money rolling in, you can tell yourself a lot of things.
Right.
But at the same time, look, I've been on a learning curve for the last year and a half or so that I hadn't had before in my life about how complicated medicine can get for when you're sick, and how few answers sometimes there are, and how blurry lines are. And sometimes there's no clear answers. Like, should I, when I was trying to decide whether I should get my thyroid removed, it was a really hard decision, and there wasn't a clear, obvious answer.
Yeah.
And you read online of pros, cons. Oh, I had a horrible, I had a good experience. So then you get to these pain things. And like we were just saying, sometimes when we think of pain, normally we're thinking like, yeah, well, I've stubbed my toe. Oh my God. No. You actually can't, if you haven't had it, and I haven't had it to the level that some people have it, if you haven't had it, you actually don't know.
Right.
And so when you do have those situations, it's modern medicine and science that has delivered some things that can help.
Yeah.
So there is a flip side. And then there's the abuse, and there's the abusive practices, and there's the greed, and then there were some people that they've highlighted in both the first and the second half that I do think they're truly, I don't know, kind of in the loose term of it, psychopathic about it. They just care about the money. They have no empathy for anyone.
Yeah, psychopathic behavior. Yeah. The documentary is interesting because it lays out a lot of the corruption and the greed and the criminality and the very little accountability that has been, enforced, and how we're still in it, essentially.
Well, like when they were saying, I think the Purdue was ordered to pay $8 billion or whatever,
right.
But they were in bankruptcy.
Right.
But they went through what the family owns, and it was like, wait, they own a portfolio of golf courses or right. Whatever it was, like a portfolio of islands, or it's like these crazy things.
Yeah. And the documentary lays it out really well in that all those people, all their wealth is siphoned off from millions of
right.
low to middle income individuals who were in a rash manner prescribed medications because their insurance company wouldn't pay for more involved treatments. Like when you have pain. So I will say that I have had brief moments of ongoing pain. I had lower back pain for a number of years. That's just left miraculously like a few years ago. And it was minor though. And it was demoralizing. Everything is negative when that's around. Like you go to dinner with your friends. It's supposed to be a fun time. You have a couple of drinks and you have a nice meal and you have good conversations and you have a few laughs. But the entire time, my lower back would be jabbing like a knife. Would just every once in a while just go. And every time it happened, it would just. I don't know why it does this, but it just completely ruins everything.
Of course.
And then you don't want to do anything. So imagine if you're a 5 and I was like more like a 1 to 3 range.
It's just it was recurring and you didn't know why, and it wasn't going away.
Well, I knew why. I have an old football injury in my back. I have a broken bone.
I don't know you telling me that.
Yeah, I have a.
And plus, you used to sleep on that bed of nails, which maybe it didn't help.
Yeah. Yeah, well, debates.
Acupuncture, though.
They're still debating, yeah. So it's demoralizing, and so when you can have some treatment, then you're going to want it. Now, I will say that the regimen that was disclosed with that woman who died was criminal. Well,
the list, I don't know if this was the real list, but the list they listed seemed unbelievable. Like,
yeah.
And
yeah, she was prescribed multiple opioids plus several sedatives, including benzodiazepine stuff, and you put all that together. So why, Berto, do opioids kill people?
Why do opioids kill people?
How do they kill people?
Well, again, I have a limited understanding. What I understand when someone is very addicted to, say, heroin, is eventually they have problems with their organs, like their heart can fail, they can have liver problems, They can have pulmonary problems. That's my understanding. And then not to mention, they can do something dramatic and harm themselves or others. And
the last one is highly debatable because, so let me tell you, so I didn't know, when I was growing up, heroin and cocaine, they all kind of felt like they were in the same category, right? Heroin makes you extremely tired and mellow. It
Right.
makes you very chill and relaxed.
It's just, the picture I have in my head is that video footage of the two parents in the car passed out with the little baby in the back.
Right.
That doesn't seem safe to me.
Right. But in all fairness, they probably just pulled over and passed out. You know what I mean? But the reason why I refute the kind of general statement of like you do bad things is like there's this association with, because of all the say no to drugs in the 80s, to me anyway, I just associated any hard drug with basically becoming psychotic, which is
right.
more associated with like extreme reactions to like psychedelics or something.
Fair enough. I'm thinking, so I saw a fentanyl documentary a bit ago, not related to this one. And I guess I'm thinking about more the fact that cops are always responding to incidents related to these abuses and
to fentanyl abuses,
fentanyl, oxycodone, all these things, right? And it's either
what kind of crimes though?
At least in the documentary, it's all sorts of stuff. People were sometimes there was crimes being committed as a result of their addiction. Sometimes it was
not because. But the point that I'm making
I'm
is
not saying they're psychotic. I'm just saying that
but even
it
when
leads them to harm themselves or others as a result of their addiction.
No, that's actually, I mean, unless you can give me a specific incident. When you're desperate for money for the substance, then you will commit criminal acts.
But that's part of the equation.
But that's not the intoxication. I'm talking about the intoxication.
Okay, but you asked how they die, and I said, they can die because they're addicted to the thing and they have to get the money and they commit crimes. Right?
Okay, all right. Well, So people die because of respiration depression. So it slows your breathing down to the point where you just stop breathing or not breathing enough and then you die. That's the main way people die from opioids. Pain meds like this in the opioid class have the general effect it has on the brain suppresses a lot of brain nervous system activity, which reduces pain receptor or pain processes to pain signals, but it reduces all signals. So you become really mellow, and it suppresses the signaling to the heart to pump. It suppresses the signaling to the lungs and the diaphragm to keep you breathing. And so people will pass out and they'll stop breathing. There's also, you can die from low blood pressure as well. There are other ways you could die from it, but that's mainly the way that you die. And I think that's important to know for people because it can, I think heroin and oxy, it can be talked about in a certain way in pop culture that makes it seem like it's super fun or something, like it's a party drug. It's not a very good party drug. It's a drug that it numbs you out, and then if you take too much, which is usually what people are trying to avoid, you're not trying to pass out, but people will take too much, and then that's when they die.
So the documentary I saw definitely did not make it seem like a party. It was every response because they were showing the cops going on all these things. It was a horror scene like out of the movie Seven every time. It was basically, like you're saying, sometimes it was just people completely unresponsive, but a lot of times it was these very chaotic situations because how desperate they are for, trying to get the drug and all these things. And tons of neglect cases, tons, like just kids being neglected because, it's crazy.
Yeah, but I also want to dispel a little bit of that association by telling you a few more stories. Certainly that happens. I mean, and I would treat a lot of children, in families like that, or adults who were children in situations like that, for sure. But the vast majority of cases that I treated with opioid problems and heroin problems, they would be your friend. You wouldn't know anything different about them. So let me tell you some other stories. So there's this other client I had, and whenever I talk about clients, I always change things about them to obscure their identity. But this guy, young guy in his 20s, worked for a tech business in Seattle, not one of the big ones, but one of the ancillary tech businesses. And nice young guy, real clean cut, real preppy, white kid, upper middle class, family, parents still together, siblings love him, has a girlfriend or fiance, that lovely person. And I met all of them because I would bring them in to family therapy to support his efforts to try to remain sober. And, I'll spare you all the details of his ups and downs, but he struggled greatly with sobriety. It was extremely difficult for him because it's the pull to use once it gets its hooks into you is so strong. He'd come home from work after being sober for like 6 months, and it would just kind of pop in his head, and then he'd be, texting his guy, and then boom, he's got it, and boom, he's high, and then he'd go in a bender for a couple weeks or maybe longer, and it was extremely difficult for him to quit. And his life was, and I could, with him, like with the other guy I told you about, he traumatized, goes to procedure, gets the med. This guy, we had investigated it, a lot to try to get at the root, so to speak, of his addiction, and there wasn't really anything there. I mean, there were some minor family issues that everyone kind of goes through, but he just, was exposed to it essentially, of partying, or a friend had it or something.
He started experimenting,
and he just loved it because it feels like what people describe it as like a warm blanket of love. It can literally make you feel like you did when you were 2 years old, being held by your mom. Being
if
sick.
it didn't feel good, it'd be hard to understand why people would start it.
Right, and I think that's the key to understand. It's not like
cigarettes, which I've never understood how people start.
Yeah, or it's not like bath salts, where you're eating someone's face off.
But it doesn't start that way.
It's a feeling of warmth. It's a feeling of relaxation. It's a feeling of no pain psychologically or physically. It's a feeling of just, all the stresses just wash away. It's a very seductive drug, and that's why it's been present, in the form of opium going back, a couple hundred years or something.
I think one of the issues with fentanyl is because if I understand correctly, if I remember from that documentary, they even briefly showed it, that first responders or cops or whatever, like they have to wear respirators in many cases. Because I don't remember the details, but there's something like they're susceptible to getting fentanyl in their system when they're responding.
Right. So fentanyl is extremely potent per milligram.
It's a whole new thing.
And the issue is that when you go into a place that's manufacturing it, obviously you need to have all the hazmat suits. But for people, and this is why people end up dying, is that the dose that you need increases dramatically over time. So you could be a year into your addiction, and the dose that you need would have killed you 6 months earlier. And what'll happen is there's just so much of the substance around. If you get rated, there's just a lot. The other thing that happens is that people will struggle with sobriety because hardly anyone wants to be addicted. No one wants to be addicted, but hardly anyone wants to use it in the way that people are using it, just chronically like this. It's very debilitating. It's sort of like with cigarettes. Past a certain period of time, no one's like a 100% happy smoker. You know what I mean? It's an addiction, and people will quit. And what'll happen is when they relapse, they will go back to a similar dosage in the past, but their tolerance is so much lower that they'll kill themselves. A lot of people will die upon relapsing. All right. Well, let's take a break, Berto. When we get back, let's do a little bit of facts about this and also celebrities who have died from this. What do you say, Berto?
Let's do it.
Hey, Deserving listeners, as you all know, I am constantly recommending that people go to therapy. We all need therapy from time to time. Well, one of the options available that is definitely worth checking out is BetterHelp. If you're looking for a therapist, I would give it a try by going to betterhelp.com/Kirk. Make sure you use the promo code Kirk because you get 10% off your first month, and it really helps us out. As you watch these videos, I know many of you have been motivated to find your own therapist, which is great because you deserve it. And I know also that it can be hard to find a good fit, find the right one for you. Well, one of the options available in terms of your shopping is to go to betterhelp.com/Kirk. I've been told you can start communicating with your therapist in under 24 hours. You can message your counselor at any time. Plus, you can schedule weekly video or phone sessions. I've also been told that it's often less expensive than in-person therapy, and you should know that this service is available to clients worldwide. So go to betterhelp.com/Kirk to get 10% off your first month today.
All right, we're back from the break. Just one little point of business. If you are not an annual patron, please do so now. Even if you're a patron, you can switch over to annual. We're trying to get everyone to do that because it's a discount to you on Patreon, and it also helps us with our planning of the future. All right, since 2000, so the past 20 years, how many have died from heroin in the United States?
Last 20 years, how many people have died from heroin? I'm going to go with 20,000.
500,000.
Oh my God.
500,000 people, yeah.
That's COVID numbers right there.
What percentage abuse opioids after being prescribed from an injury or surgery? What percentage?
Okay.
So, of everyone who gets prescribed,
right.
what percentage end up abusing?
Specifically for opioids, I'm going to say 20%.
4%.
Oh, good.
But still,
that's a lot.
Yeah, that's 1 in 25.
I was afraid you were going to,
But do you know how many people, especially in the last
prescribed
30 years after an injury or surgery were prescribed? I mean, this is a lot of people.
Yeah.
In 2016, how many prescriptions for opioid drugs were written by prescribers?
In which year?
2016.
16. How many prescriptions?
So it's similar to today. Yeah,
in the
similar
US?
To today. Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna go with.
You have like almost 400 million people.
Yeah. I'm gonna go with 10 million.
289 million.
Come on, stop it.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. Wait, what?
Yeah. Well, so some people have multiple prescriptions, right? But still.
I know, but come on.
But still, even if everyone had 5 prescriptions, which would be really weird.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Now, some of them are like for you and me, post-surgery, you're given a prescription with 3 pills in it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But a lot of people, it's not the case. There's a particular problem in the U.S. because of the way our system works and how wealthy we are, I suppose.
I will say that overprescription is crazy. Like even with stuff that's not opioids. For example, again, as a result of my recent health problems, at one point, someone prescribed me like potassium citrate tablets. Okay. I never ended up using the 1 box because it ended up not being necessary. But they kept refilling the prescription at Walgreens, and I would keep getting all these calls. I ended up with like 10 of these boxes at home. Never used or needed one. Because like the left hand doesn't sometimes talk to the right hand, and they don't stop the prescription.
Yeah.
It's crazy. And so I can imagine with this stuff too, like all it would have taken for me to get a whole bunch of that oxycodone is for me to just say that I was still in pain.
Right.
Now I would probably still be getting those prescriptions.
Yeah. No. So what I will say is that prescribers are getting a little bit better than they were 5-10 years ago regarding what we're talking about right now. But it's only some prescribers, it's not all, where they will say, look, try Tylenol. If that doesn't work, let me know, and we can maybe try something else. And then if they try something else, they're like, look, I'm going to give you 3 of these pills, but that's it. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to have to think about some ongoing pain treatments like physical therapy or mindfulness and this kind of thing. All right, so we had to take a little break because, well, tell us, Berto.
Yeah, so actually I was getting a call from my dad. My dad was operated today for his right eye. They're also going to operate his left eye, but they have to do one at a time. I think it's for cataracts. And he was telling me how much pain he's in, actually, which is very apropos. And he was telling me that he had already taken the prescribed Tylenols or whatever, but that he was still in pain. So he called the doctor, and the doctor said, well, maybe switch it up, take ibuprofen next, take this one that's a little more powerful. But he's a little worried. He's like, the pain has been like shooting pains from the eye, and it hurts his head and shoots down. So, and this is just a small example. He just had that operation. It's a fairly, you know, as operations go, it is the eye, but, you know, and here he is with pain management issues. And I can see from the patient's perspective, it's like, what do I do? This pain is nearly unbearable. I already took the pills they gave me. What do I do? And these aren't even opioids, you know?
Right. Yeah. Didn't Chris on Sopranos get addicted because of his...
Yep, he had, that's right. He got addicted because of pain meds.
He got shot.
Yeah.
And he was in pain.
That was right. And of course, he already had the psychology to go with it.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
So, tougher bluff, Berto, painkillers kill more people than heroin and cocaine combined. So, you know, prescription pills.
More than heroin and cocaine combined. Wow. I mean, I'm going to go bluff, hopefully.
It's tough.
It's tough?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, I'm surprised, too. I would have thought for sure that heroin killed more. Not because painkillers are good, but because...
I should have known, though.
But that I thought more people transition from painkillers to heroin. Right. But I think a lot of people stay in the painkiller realm and die from overdoses there.
That's incredible.
Let me give you another story of another client. So this is a teenager girl who had drug-addicted parents and went into the foster care system. And by the time I met her, she was a teenager and was in a lot of conflict with her foster parents. And this is back when I was doing in-home therapy for families, and I would go into the home and I would talk with her every week. And she was an interesting client, very resistant to me, but
interesting.
But as a lot of teenagers were, but would play along for the most part, but it was a struggle. And the foster mom would give me updates when I'd come in the house. She's doing this. Now she's with this older guy, and he's a heroin addict. And I don't like her being with him. And for her, she had massive attachment injuries. Obviously, a lot of anger, a lot of disillusionment with society and the system, and her foster parents and her peers. And found this guy that was someone that she could fall in love with, someone that she felt safe with. And I treated her for a while, and she was very, very set on moving out as soon as she could. She hated authority. She didn't want to go to school. She didn't want to do anything. She just thought, I just want to live with my boyfriend and everything will be fine. And I didn't hear, and at some point we terminated. I'm not exactly sure why. It was a long time ago. And then we got a call from the foster mom years later. And she's like, do you remember so-and-so? And I actually didn't, because I'm not really good with names. I'm really good with faces. I'll see someone across in a mall, and I'll be like, I was in second grade with that kid.
Oh, wow.
With that guy. You know, like I'm really good at recognizing faces, but names I'm just awful at. But anyway, and she's like, well, anyway, she died from heroin overdose. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And then I hung up the phone, and then I looked up on my records and instantly remembered. I was like, because in my head, I'm like, was this a client that I barely saw? And I was like, no, I worked with this client for months.
Is a foster family, pardon the ignorance, like, do they have multiple kids? Or is it,
well, every foster parent is different,
okay.
But this was one that would have kind of a
oh my gosh.
I mean, they had a revolving door of kids, but they also had some that stayed there indefinitely. But I called her back and said, of course I remember, I'm so sorry, I'm terrible with names. And it was, I don't know the circumstances, but I can imagine the circumstances, that she had a lot of relational PTSD, and when she was introduced to heroin or painkillers from her boyfriend, it made her feel okay, and she probably struggled with addiction, and then used too much one time on accident and died. Actually, there's another story that I can actually say the name, because I won't say the name but I'm pretty sure we've said his name. Anyway, there was an early fan of this podcast who in the UK who
interesting
he was like one of the first super fans, one of the first before patrons, before famous patron Lyndon.
Sure.
There was this guy, and he had his own radio show. And interviewed me on his radio show in the UK. And anyway, I mean, I think it was like a web-based radio show. But anyway, good guy, great guy, fun guy, and his friend or partner, associate, someone reached out to me years ago and said that he had overdosed on heroin.
No.
Yeah.
Overdosed and
died.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Wow.
On accident,
Yeah.
So what famous people have overdosed on opioids? And this is one of the, famous people are famous, but when a lot of famous people die or have something, then it's kind of an indication of we have a problem, right? Like, for example, Bert, let's just compare it to the COVID thing. What famous people have died from COVID that you know of?
I don't remember. I know that there were a couple names of older.
Yeah, I could look it up. I actually have a list, but what's his face that ran for president?
But the fact that there were people that were famous that have a lot of money usually, and that died from COVID, because I actually would say that's even more telling, because that sample size is pretty representative. With the drugs, I don't know how much it is or isn't, because you would also think that celebrities are more exposed to parties and extremes and money for drugs and things.
Well, I think that, and I think that the pressures of being in the limelight cause people to need to do things. For you and me, Berto, we have a 0.001% of a exposure to that sort of fame content. You think like someone like Prince, who died from. You're a content provider in a sense. You have to put out output. You've got to put stuff out there. You got to perform. You got to record. You got to do press junkets, and you got to be on. And you have to have energy. You have to have good sleep. You have to be able to bring the magic every single time.
And if you've been doing it since you were a kid,
and if you have a very energetic dance routine on stage where you're jumping up and down in high heel shoes, and you're probably going to have some back pain or some leg pain or something. Didn't Michael Jackson
get addicted to something after his hair incident?
Right. So, or Elvis Presley, who needed to sleep at night, but also needed to perform during the day, and back then they were just handing these things out like candy. Man. But anyway, so famous people, I mentioned Prince. He died of a fentanyl overdose when he was 57.
Fentanyl, huh?
Yeah.
Wow. And didn't that actress, she was in a movie with Ashton Kutcher.
What's her face?
Yeah, what was her name?
She was in. She was in 8 Mile, right?
Yeah, she was the love interest in 8 Mile.
Right. Brittany Murphy.
Brittany Murphy. Didn't she die from drugs?
Let me look it up. Brittany Murphy death. Let's see. Firefighters rescue. She's dead. Cardiac arrest. So it appears to be natural. It's
natural.
Her death certificate, cause of death deferred. Primary was pneumonia, anemia, and multiple drug intoxication. Hydrocodone.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Who else?
Let's see. Famous drugs. Didn't David Carradine die?
I don't know.
In a very awkward.
No, I think he died from asphyxiation.
Asphyxiation.
But I
thought he was also high on stuff.
Don't quote me on that. Well, once I name these names, you're going to be like, oh yeah, of course. So we got Heath Ledger.
That was drugs?
Yeah.
For some reason, I had in my mind that it was a suicide.
No, it was accidental. Well, I think it was debated, but I think it was. Most people are saying it was accidental. It was oxycodone, hydrocodone. This is Oxycontin.
Oh, jeez.
And diazepam, which is a benzodiazepine, which is another thing that can actually cause alcohol, benzodiazepines, and opioids can slow your breathing, especially when you use them together, and you can die. So be very careful when you're drinking alcohol and taking a benzo. I had another client that died just while we're on the alcohol thing, because alcohol kills a lot of people too.
Yeah.
She was in college and didn't drink that much, and she was with her friends. She goes to bed in the other room, and everyone's still kind of in the living room. And when they, went to wake her up in the morning, she just died. And she didn't even drink that much. And she wasn't like a partier, She just.
But it just stopped her breathing.
Yeah, alcohol can do that. Anyway. Tom Petty.
Tom Petty?
Yeah.
I knew he died. Wow.
Yeah, accidental overdose on fentanyl and oxycodone.
What?
He was treating pain from a fractured hip.
Oh my gosh.
Now, Kurt Cobain, he didn't die from heroin, he died from suicide or from murder, depending on what you believe. But he definitely
was addicted to opioids.
He was definitely suffering from heroin addiction. River Phoenix.
What?
Yeah. Yeah.
I guess I just blocked all these out of my memory.
Overdose.
But why would they die?
Overdose of heroin, Jim Morrison.
Yeah, I knew that one. That's true.
Philip Seymour Hoffman.
Another one that I thought was suicide.
No, I mean, in all likelihood not. Yeah. He had one of those classic situations where he, if I remember right, used after a stretch of sobriety.
I see.
And went on a bender and
oh man,
took what he would have taken earlier, and it killed him.
Don't say Robin Williams.
No.
No, he was suicide, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
John Belushi.
Okay, I knew that.
And a number of others. But, these are 8 of the most famous people in our society.
Yeah.
All died from opioids.
Yeah.
And that's just...
And a lot of familiar names in those lists.
That's just the famous people.
Of opioids.
We have a problem.
Yeah.
We have a problem. And there's all these songs, rap songs that, venerate. There's a song by Future called Oxy. If you've ever heard it, it is. Yeah. I mean, from the lyrics, I can't tell if he is making fun or he's aware of the problems, because at one point he says comatose, Well,
there is a song, and I forgot the name of the dude, but there is a song about other kinds of pills. Man, this story is going nowhere fast, but I have heard mumble rap songs that are very in the middle, where you listen to the lyrics and you're like, wait, it sounds like they don't like it, but they're also kind of glamorizing it.
Right. Yeah, Purple Drank, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Eminem talked about Oxy a lot, I seem to remember. So, now why? Well, because a lot of these fellas and artists suffered from a lot of trauma growing up and neglect, and use these substances as a way to numb that pain.
Yeah.
And that's the point I really want to get across to people, is that opioids, it's not glamorous. And Berto, painted a good picture, but even if we don't go into the kind of horror crack houses in which some of these people die, the clients that I worked with, let me tell you about another client. She was from a family, and she was in her 20s, and she was struggling with getting her life off the ground, and her sisters were doing really well, her brothers were doing really well, big family, and she felt really bad about herself. And she was I think maybe the last sibling to live at home, and she, late 20s. And she didn't have many friends. She was really shy, and someone comes along and gives her a Percocet, or somehow she got Percocets. And again, for the first time in her life, she can socialize.
Oh, wow.
She can even just hang out with her parents and feel normal.
Oh, how addicting would that be instantly?
Yeah, just like for her, taking the pill made it so that she could have fun. So, she didn't want to she didn't want to be intoxicated. Yeah. She just wanted to be like mellow. You know how some people will use alcohol as like a social lubricant. She would use it. And so she was able to according to her, live a happier life, maybe even get a job. It was like her gateway into functionality.
Sorry, in a very small, teeny way, a lot of us can relate to that, like you're saying with alcohol. I remember, when I used to go out in clubs and things, that difference in how I would feel, how powerful I would feel socially when I'd had a couple drinks in me. And it took me many years to learn how to sort of evoke that from myself without having to have alcohol.
Right.
It's hard.
Yeah.
And that's nothing compared to the feelings these people get, but it's real. It's like you're at the party or at the club and you're like, ho hum, I don't really want to talk to anyone. Oh, I should go talk to them. No, I can't. Then you have 2 drinks. You're like, whoa, I'm social. I can talk.
Right.
And then you have success with talking.
Right.
And it's like, wow, I should do that more often.
There's 2 things I'll say. One is that both alcohol and heroin will reduce certain likelihoods of, and I'm not a brain scientist, so this is going to sound all non-jargony, but brain processes that are related to fear. And when you don't feel the fear, then you're less inhibited.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll say is that we have a lot of associations with alcohol. So there's a chance that if you went to a club and someone gave you non-alcoholic drink that tasted like drinking, after 2 so-called drinks,
I might still feel that.
Right. Because the other effect that happens is whenever you go to a party at the beginning, even if everyone's hammered, everyone's shy because you're trying to feel out the situation.
Yeah.
And over time, you start to, be able to feel comfortable. And they've done, studies on that. They'll give people they'll say this is alcohol, and then they'll act all uninhibited when there's no alcohol in it. Not to say that alcohol also doesn't help, but anyway, so she took the Percocet. Percocet was her thing. She really...
Is that also an opioid, or is that pain? Okay.
Yeah, it's, It's oxycodone.
Oh. Okay.
It's the same as, it's the Percocet and OxyContin.
It's just another brand.
Brand names of oxycodone, yeah. And she was found out somehow, I think by her family or something. Like they discovered the pills and they forced her into treatment. And they all came in, the whole family came into my office. And I discovered that she felt extremely insecure, for lack of a better term, and had some personality problems because of that, due to her family. And so I treated her family and her individual psychology, and then she was also this is when I worked actually at a drug treatment center. And so I was the therapist on staff, and then there were all these, chemical dependency people. So she went to group, and anyway, so she was doing the whole thing. And she was a great client, and we had a lot of great conversations, and I was really trying to help her to understand that the way she's being treated in her life and the way she sees herself is unfair, and trying to, help her to see the goodness in her and have the strength to draw boundaries with her parents and this sort of thing. And she achieved sobriety. And for months, I was treating her. And every time I'd ask her, how you doing with your sobriety? She's like, I'm doing good. And the chemical dependency people would say, yeah, she's doing good. And then one day, the chemical dependency people came to me and she's like, so she had a dirty urinalysis, a drug test for opioids, but it was pretty low. It was a pretty low number, so it could have been a false positive. And I was like, I'm sure that's a false positive. There's no way, because her and I have a great relationship, and she would tell me, because we're, and she knows that she can tell me, and I wouldn't even tell you. Like, that was part of my role, was like, you can tell me. I won't even tell the other staff members here if you're using, because I want you to be able to tell me. And I met with her, and I said, you got this positive thing. She said, oh no, I promise you, up and down. And I believed her. I was like, and I go to chemical dependency people, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is a false positive. And they were convinced, no, she's using. And I'm like, and they had done this a lot. And so I was getting annoyed with them anyway, prior to this, of how harsh they talked about their clients, about my clients. And so I got defensive, and I was like, I don't know. I think you guys are jumping the gun here. I you know, those tests can produce false positives sometimes. You know, if you have a bagel with poppy seeds on it or something. And this goes on for a while. I think she has another dirty UA, and they're like, "Yep, she's using." And the problem is that if she's using it, they're going to kick her out of the whole clinic, because often that's how these, you know, the wisdom of these chemical dependency systems work. And there's some wisdom to it, but it can be a little draconian. And I'm still like, I just can't see it, because I can't see her lying to me so much. Well, then her parents or someone finds on her phone this whole string of texts between her and her drug dealer. Not only was she getting, you know, Percocets from him, but she was also how do I say it? She was threatening him in certain ways. Okay. And they were kind of going back and forth, and the language she was using was shocking to me. It was this whole other person. Yeah. You know? And that's the thing. Wow. Because of the shame, you compartmentalize. Yeah. And you don't want to admit it to anyone, or even to the self, that you're doing this. You just say, well, look, I'm just taking one pill a day, or I'm just taking 5 pills a day. It's okay. Everything's fine. You know, I'm doing okay. You know, I don't want anyone to be disappointed in me, and I don't want to be kicked out of the program. I like talking to Kirk. I don't want to be, you know. And it was one of those moments where I realized that drug addiction, particularly, you know, Percocet addiction, can be so powerful that it will envelop your personality, such that a seasoned therapist like me, who is very skeptical of people lying to me, especially in situations like that, was completely naive to the fact that she might be lying to me. You know, like I'm pretty good at detecting when people are lying to me. And I mean, not detecting,
you've only fallen for the Prince of Sahara several times, but after that you learned.
You're talking about Loki or someone?
The little chain letters for sending money to Nigeria or something.
I want to retract what I said. I'm not good at detecting lying. I'm good at being skeptical of people saying things to me when there's a possibility of lying. And anyway.
And yet this was so extreme in the personality change that.
Yeah. And it was, you know, really was hard on her. And she was so deeply, deeply, deeply ashamed. Yeah. And again, her life is fine. She's living with her family. You know, she's in her 20s. She's single, not a big deal. But another little asterisk on the story was during our treatment, when she was sober, presumably, she fell and had an injury and went to the hospital, ER. And they treated her because it was kind of a nasty injury. And as she was leaving, the doctor said, here's a prescription for Percocets. And she's trying to be sober.
Oh, right.
From Percocets.
Jeez.
Or whatever, some
equivalent.
Drug. And the doctor and she's so shy that she's so ashamed that she says, oh, no, thank you. But she doesn't say, I'm an addict. Right. Don't do that. Right. But she says, I'm sorry. That's okay. I'll be okay. And he's like, no.
Take it. You'll need it.
You'll need it.
You'll want this.
Just in case. And she's like, and right now she has the devil and the angel on her shoulder. Yeah. One is saying, take it. The other is saying, do not take it.
It's like, look, this doctor is telling you.
Right.
You should listen to the doctor.
Right. And
you don't have to take it. Just take it.
Yeah. You can just fill it. You don't have to take it.
Oh, man.
And the doctor kept pushing. And I can't remember the outcome, but I can't remember if she took it and then didn't fill it or finally said no. But situations like that. And let me do another asterisk.
I wish she could have said, listen, sometimes your patients are addicted to these things. Yeah. And I am that.
Yeah.
Because like that doctor doesn't even consider that might be a problem.
Right. Right. So another asterisk to this is early in my career, you know, as a psychotherapist, I have taken classes and been supervised by people that understand medications. And so I don't prescribe, obviously, but I do know enough under some circumstances with some medications how to speak directly with patients about their medications. Benzodiazepines I know a lot about, and there was a time when I thought I knew a lot about pain meds. This is early in my career. And one of my family members was having some pain, and she was prescribed, she was having tremendous pain from shingles.
Ooh.
By the way, everyone out there, get your shingles vaccine.
Oh.
I'm getting mine next week.
Is that a refresher thing you have to do?
No, it's something you get when you're 50.
Oh, okay.
Because that's when your likelihood of having...
Jeez.
Have you had chicken pox?
I did.
Yeah. So shingles is like a recurring...
Adult version of it?
Well, it's the virus... Because, you never get rid of the virus. You and I
still have chicken pox.
We still have that virus, from what I understand. And shingles is like an outbreak.
Yeepers.
Essentially.
And it can be really bad, right?
It can be completely debilitating, as it was for my family.
Which, by the way, can we next time? Just saying, as we have committees to name diseases, can we give a scary, damaging disease a better name than shingles?
Yeah.
Because when you hear shingles, that just doesn't sound bad.
Yeah.
It sounds like, oh, I've got the shingles. Like it's a little, like a funny little thing.
What would you think it should be called?
I don't know, death plasma. I've got the death plasma. Or bone extrusions. I've got bone extrusions. What does it do? It's got nothing to do with bones or extrusions, but it's bad.
Yeah. I got Darth Vader disease.
Yeah.
So
the face melt. I've got the face melt.
That sounds like a patty melt. Then I'm like, yum, face melt.
Or a guitar riff.
By the way, I texted you the other day because I rewatched Raiders of the Lost Ark and was loving it, and then when the face melt scene happened, it's been a while since I've seen that scene in the context of the movie. It is a cheesy ass scene.
Well, yes, but at the time,
yeah.
Oh, it was mind-blowing and scary and traumatizing.
Yeah. But
I mean, I was younger than you when I saw it, so
yeah. But that movie is, it's a classic, but
so good.
But those, because one of the heads explodes. I mean, yeah, the scene is like a scene from a B movie in the 80s.
Yeah, the wax melting from the face.
Yeah.
True.
Anyway. So,
but the nice thing about that movie is that as far as special effects go, most of the rest of it was very practical stuff. Like it's a car chase. It's a room full of snakes. It's
yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
So I was telling my family member, because she was telling me she's on the pain, and I'm like, well, they're giving you pain meds, and she's like, well, I don't want to take them. I'm like, why do you want to take them? She's like, well, I'm afraid of becoming addicted. I'm afraid of becoming addicted. And I was like, don't be ridiculous. Just take the meds. You're okay.
What could go wrong?
And she's like, and then I talked to her another time. I'm like, are you taking the meds? She's like, no. I'm like, worried about addiction. I'm like, okay, let's talk about this. And she's like, well, are they addictive? I'm like, well, yeah, and I was looking back, I was saying the party line.
Right, you were the pusher.
That the research was supposedly kind of saying, what the FDA was saying, which we'll get into in a second, which was it's not likely to be addictive, essentially, if it is for legitimate pain.
Yeah.
If you're in legitimate pain and you take it, the chance of you becoming addicted is actually really low. That was the party line, which of course it was not true.
Because the molecules know what your intentions are.
I know, right? It's so dumb, but
I'm not trying to get addicted. Like the whole what was it? Partial addiction or something? They came up with pseudo addiction.
Yeah.
It's like, well, no. I know that they are robbing convenience stores and robbing from their parents, and I know that they're like, coming in and running and trying to get the drugs by all means possible. They're not actually addicted. I know it seems that way. They're just pseudo addicted.
Right. Yeah.
Because they want the drugs. I know that's what addicts want. Yeah, I know, but they want them because they're in pain.
Right. Yeah, because the whole pseudo addiction lie was, just to reiterate what we were saying, is someone comes in for pain, they get prescribed the opioid, they need more and more because they're tolerant over time, and as they're coming in asking for more and more, they look like addicts who are drug seeking,
right?
But they're not actually addicted. They're pseudo addicts, meaning that they're not addicted. They just look like an addict because they're actually trying to alleviate their pain.
That was the logic, yes.
Yeah, it was ridiculous.
There's a South Park episode about undercover cop It's an outrageous episode, but I love it. And the whole premise of the joke is, how deep can you go undercover, or what things can you do undercover before you're kind of no longer an undercover cop? So it's a similar thing. Like, how much of an addict can you be before you're really an addict? You know, it's like,
yeah. And thank God she kept pushing back on me, because like that 4% number, she could have been one of those 4%.
Yeah.
Okay, so very briefly, I want to kind of rattle off what the documentary lays out. That we really had a perfect storm over the past 30 years that resulted in 500,000 people dying. 500,000.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Maybe more. And a lot of people's lives ruined, going to prison, you know, all the accoutrement that come from addiction and a life of addiction. So it was a perfect storm of a lot of different factors. One, you have a lot of people in pain. Yep. There's a lot of pain in the world, and then our culture of anti-pain, and that pain is bad. Then two is the pills. We have a culture of pills.
Yeah.
Where when you have a problem, there's a pill. Yeah. And also patients wanting pills, which is another thing they didn't really talk about in the documentary. Was it doesn't take much, you know, when you have patient and physician both interested in pill as savior, then you have a lot. So it's not just the physicians or just the big pharma. There's a lot of patients going, please give me pills. I want relief.
I didn't understand this at first when I saw and then read American Psycho, and then it was also in Fight Club, because they would describe this ridiculous set of drugs that each of them were on. Like, especially in American Psycho, you'd be like, well, I took this, that, and then this one is taking this, that, and the other thing. And I kind of wrote it off as like, wow, that's exaggeration for the purpose of the book or the movie. But then after having seen some of these things, and especially this documentary, I kind of get the sense that that was no exaggeration, and that's what happens, that people enter that world of, oh, I can alleviate a lot of my woes via these medicines. And if you say the right thing to your doctor, all of a sudden they can prescribe you a lot of these things. Yeah. And then you kind of, in a sense, get addicted to getting more of these things.
Right.
And like, well, I take this one for this, I take this one for anxiety, I take this one for that.
Right. The classic is, I take this pill to give me energy, and I take this pill to put me to sleep.
Yeah, right.
And if you took neither pill, you'd be okay. You know, not always. But anyway. The third element that contributed to the perfect storm is capitalism without regulation.
Yeah.
So you have so much money to be made.
I mean, the numbers they were throwing around are just incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you're handing out almost 4 million prescriptions a year, and those prescriptions involve hundreds of dollars of meds, we're talking about a lot of money.
Wait, I mean, didn't you say in 2016 there were 290 million?
Like 390 million?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Like crazy.
Yeah. And then you have advertisers getting better, and you have parties for prescribers, and, you know, sales reps and all this stuff, because there's just so much money.
Those videos,
I know,
those marketing videos.
So I thought of you because in your travels of your pseudo opioid job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like, okay,
the hype stage shows.
Look, full disclosure. So there was, let's call him a wizard. Let's say he lived in this like Emerald City, you know, Seattle, and there was this level of frustration because normal poppy fields can put humans to sleep, but not robots, you know? And so we would have these conferences hyping up the new types of poppy fields that could get after Tin Men or robots and things. And it was like that. It was these kinds of crazy over-the-top videos.
But putting that aside,
cool it can be.
You've been to these kinds of hype shows.
Absolutely.
How ridiculous are they?
They're ridiculous. Yeah. And you make these little videos that are these very self-contained inside jokes within the community of your
But as an employee,
it's awkward. It's embarrassing.
It's embarrassing?
Yeah.
Why do they do it then?
Well, and this is even a subculture within the subculture, because these are the sales teams. Sales usually, and at least they used to be a lot more in, well, anyways, in a sales organization, you get commissions, right?
So for the listeners, if you haven't watched the documentary, they intersperse these hype videos where, you know, the sales reps are rapping about selling OxyContin, and they're in these stage shows where they're doing like dance routines
and they're working the lyrics into the lyrics, things like fentanyl is my friend. They're doing raps, or they're doing, you know, all sorts of different styles.
Well, then they also have a song about titration, which is this, and these are
cover of a song.
These are sales reps who know nothing about medicine, by the way, or they don't have a medical degree, that are working into their profits party, extravaganza notions of, brainwash your prescribers to titrate, meaning
go up,
start low, but make sure you work your way up.
And I mean, it's getting the whole wrong lesson out of what's right, as they were explaining. Titration is meant to be like kind of the opposite, like start as low as you can.
Yeah.
And maybe if you need to, go up. This was like, well, let's go up. Let's keep going up.
And of course, when you become tolerant, you will go up.
You will go up.
Right.
I'm down with titration.
Yeah. That one guy was saying he was taking 50 pills of the highest, like 120 milligrams or something like that. I mean, he said it took him like 15 minutes just to take all those pills, you know? Anyway, but yeah, so these hype was just embarrassing to watch.
So bad. And so I remember those in the 90s. There were a lot of those. And like I said, you are within your little niche community of whatever business you're in, industry. And then the sales organization is its own sub niche because they get paid commission. And so they have these very big rallies. Like I remember this a lot because not only would you have like a lot of the events for the core company are usually more about what's the product, what's the latest thing. But on the sales organization, it's to really get everyone pumped up about going out in the field and getting those sales.
Yeah, it's like religion.
Yeah.
Like,
so
these
like
Scientology, like getting people hyped up.
That's right.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
there was a part of the documentary where the one guy was talking about like, who are the most trustworthy people we can think of, and they were listing like nurses, doctors, and stuff. I was surprised they didn't make the point because on the bottom they said, politicians, but salespeople generally are also distrusted. That's why to them it's genius if they can get the doctors to do the selling for them.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And by the way, side note, I talked about this recently in another episode with Bob, that in the mid-90s, I was the project manager of the market research effort to evaluate Bill Gates' hype shows for Windows 95.
Oh.
So this is...
So you know about this world. Wow.
So this... so Microsoft hired my market research firm. I was 24, just fresh out of college, and I was in charge of gathering the data. I had to hire people, and then I analyzed the data and wrote the reports. And I actually designed the survey and everything. And
wow.
Yeah, there was lasers and smoke and music.
Do you remember the song they licensed?
Right. This is the famous one where Bill Gates is on stage with the other CEOs and they're dorkily dancing around and stuff, right?
That might be it. Oh yeah, I've seen the video of them dancing like that. That might be the one. But do you remember because the song was "Start Me Up"?
Yeah, it was
Rolling Stones.
Okay, yeah, it was a long time ago, but but people liked it, because especially at the time. I mean, 90, 94, 95, Microsoft. I mean, it was like it was the company of the world, And
by the way, so speaking of sales organizations, so that was at a time where, because nowadays companies like Microsoft, Google, these kinds of companies, when they have salespeople, there's mainly two categories. One is they either go to enterprises and say, hey, how many seats of this enterprise product are you going to buy, right? Or they might go to stores like Walmart or something and say, hey, stock our hardware and things. But one thing that's not there very much anymore is the actual software boxes. But back in the 90s, that was all it was, right? You had these massive boxes. Do you remember how big the Office and Windows boxes were?
Yeah.
Office was like this humongous thing that came with this gigantic manuals, and you really felt good about paying the $200 for the product, right?
Yeah.
Well, those salespeople had to go around the country and around the world to move that product.
Move an actual thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a hard copy of a thing. Yeah. The other thing is government. So you have pain, you have pain. A lot of people have pain. You have pill culture, you have capitalism without regulation, and then you have government corruption. lobbyists and kickbacks.
Oh, that bill they were talking about, where it was one of these classic 1984 names for a bill.
Yeah.
Like the Family Protection Act, where we're removing kids and parents from each other. You know?
Yeah.
It's just...
Right. The bill was essentially making it so that the government couldn't stop big pharma from harming human beings.
Yeah.
Or they
but
would
it was
have...
called something like the right for patients to choose or something.
Yeah, yeah.
You know.
And the number 5 thing is brainwashing. So you will brainwash the public about the pain med. You minimize the fact that it's addictive. You tell prescribers, and this is the genius of it, and they kind of went into this in the first episode, is that you tell the prescribers, and as a big pharma company, you believe this. It's what gets through the night. Is we're on a mission of altruism. These people are in pain.
Yep.
And you're not going to prescribe meds because you have some kind of hang up about it. You're gonna deny a patient relief from their pain because you have some kind of reservation that's not even based on science. What's wrong with you?
Right.
Then you have a culture of evil drug addict culture, essentially like, well, these are good people. These are patients. They're not going to become addicted because they're not strung out on the streets. They're not some inner city kid that, is prone to addiction. These are suburban white people. They're not going to have a problem with this sort of thing. Instead of recognizing that anyone, if you give, opioids to anybody for a long enough time, they're going to become addicted.
Yeah.
Now, how easy they can get off of it, dependent on a lot of things, but anyone can have a problem with drugs and alcohol, not just like the bad people, but that, we still have that point of view.
By the way, I've another thing I've realized over the last 9 months, in general, my dad was a doctor. He's a psychiatrist, but he was an MD, and my stepdad as well. So I kind of grew up really with this ideal notion of, man, doctors. I mean, first of all, you go through so much schooling, and they're generally really intelligent, and they've really got this air of authority to them. And so I generally, would always just like trust the doctor. You just gotta like, whatever they say, you gotta do it. Now, I'm not meaning to say that, doctors don't have good intentions and things. It's just that in the last 9 months, I've realized, oh, okay, well, first of all, there's doctors and there's doctors. But even in addition to that, a doctor is working, right? They're working, they're seeing patients. They have knowledge that they learned in school, and then they have to refresh that knowledge. They'll read this paper, they'll do this. But how diligent they are about that it also varies widely. And how much. So when someone is in pain or has a disease and is smart and has the time and resources to look up information, a lot of times you can look up the actual recent papers being published, recent studies being published, and it becomes a little bit of a conflict where you go and you ask your doctor, hey, so I read about a study. And you're not even saying I read on Reddit, you're saying I read a study with, control, blah, 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 and it said this. What are your thoughts on that? And a lot of times the doctors won't know what the hell you're talking about. Right. And the good doctors say, oh, I'll send me the link. I'll let you know. The not so good doctors will say like, oh, that's why I hate the internet. This is the advent of Wikipedia is the worst thing that could happen for, Or
they'll go along with it without checking.
Yeah, exactly. Or worse, right? Like, yeah, sure, maybe we shouldn't do it because you just told me about something you may or may not have read that may or may not be valid.
Right. Yeah. Which I sort of get. In my field of psychology, it's similar that there are so many reasons why people come into therapy, and it's impossible for any one therapist to be an expert on all those things. Yeah. But we're expected to be an expert in all those things. Right. And I think that there should be, unfortunately for clinicians, because it might be a little bit more boring, is a more highly specialized clinicians, you specialize in trauma and all of your education and you specialize in pain management. You specialize in antidepressant meds, and I think with that, you would become expert. Anyway, other things that contributed to the problem in the past 30 years are bad physicians, corrupt prescribers, sloppy prescribers, addicted prescribers, uneducated prescribers. Then you have...
And the regulators, like that one guy who then got hired, is like, well, we didn't hire him right away. It was like, I don't know, a year or two. Remember, it's like he was a regulator, someone I think from
Oh, right.
the FDA or something. And
Right. Well, I'll get into that in a second. That's a whole that's my main point that I'll end with. But anyway, also they covered up the deaths,
right,
similar to the cigarette industry or the gasoline industry with global climate change. There's this capitalistic incentive to have a lot of press and quote unquote science to back up the fact that, pseudo addiction is real and that only so many people are dying. Right. And then you have bad politicians, corrupt politicians, uneducated politicians, and all those things you add up and you have 500,000 dead and counting, by the way. Jeez. So here's my main point that needs to change. So I'm not an expert on this, but the little bit I understand about how our system works is that capitalism there's pros and cons. And one of the cons is that without regulation, we have problems like this. And you can't, in my view, expect a capitalistic system to produce altruistic companies. That's just not how things work. Yep. So a system based on capitalism will produce companies based on capitalism, which is based on wealth acquisition and market power.
And you get the good parts about it, which are people very motivated to innovate.
Right.
And you get the baggage.
Right. So you give them enough freedom to innovate and make money to sustain themselves, but you also watch so that the greater good of the consumer and the country and of the company itself, because if Big Pharma is going to blow themselves out of existence by corruption, then that doesn't do anyone any good. So, or in the gasoline industry, if we're going to destroy our planet, there's not going to be anyone left to buy gasoline. Right. So let's all, think about this.
This is an argument I frequently have with my libertarian friends, which is that there is a perception of, or an idea that, if we just let full-blown, unrestricted free market capitalism go, it will work and it'll be fine.
Yeah.
And
it's literally never happened.
Never happened. And the examples of the times in history in our country where there was sort of that going on, it led to disastrous abuses.
Right.
And it's like, come on.
Yeah, I mean, you don't have to look far. I mean, Amazon, all these, there's a lot of problems.
And that's with regulations.
Right.
Like that's,
with some regulations, right.
Yeah, but
so what needs to happen, we have an agency, a federal agency, that is supposed to have put an end to all of this from the beginning.
Right.
It's called the Food and Drug Administration.
Yep.
The problem is that this organization is hamstrung by lack of funds and Congress from both sides of the aisle hampering their ability to regulate, to the point where in the United States right now, not only with opioids, but with all sorts of pseudoscientific treatments that are being marketed to people as if they will help you when they will not. We have such a problem when we have scientists who are working for FDA going, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, that's opioid. Yeah, that's a problem. But we can't do anything about it because Congress won't let us, and we're not funded enough to be. We would have to have so many agents in the field doing sting operations, blah blah blah, or working with local, law enforcement agencies.
And there's no oversight on the oversight. So then you have the small, I'm hoping / expecting percentage of FDA people that then are corrupt on top of that,
right?
And then join the private sector,
right? They're not being paid enough, and then you have this FDA officer who ends up being hired by the Sackler family, who then tells, and so what happened was, and so this was the most egregious corruption, because when I think of the FDA, I think of them as like heroes. I think of them as like the who was the guy that got Al Capone? What was that guy's name?
Oh, man.
From the Untouchables.
Yeah, I know.
Anyway, that guy.
The Attorney General, dude.
Yeah.
Actually, not the Attorney General, right? The guy in charge of going after him.
Gosh darn it. Untouchable.
Kevin Costner.
Yeah, Untouchables. He plays... Elliot. Yeah.
Elliot Ness?
Elliot Ness.
Elliot
Right.
Ness.
Nice. I didn't have to look it up. You said it. I consider these guys to be heroes. You know, they're out there trying to protect us. They're those feds that you want in your corner, but they're so restricted and unable to do anything that they essentially are doing nothing.
Yeah.
Or very, very little. And we have Congress that are paid for by Big Pharma to not do anything for FDA. Yep. And then you have these do-gooders in the FDA are just like, please let us do something. And then Congress says no. And then the Big Pharma pays them money. And then we pay Big Pharma because we're being tricked by the government and by FDA. And anyway, but going back to the most egregious thing was you have the FDA agent who
meets with the
Big Pharma people
to design their, essentially handcraft their approval.
Right. So it's pretty clear that what happened was Big Pharma went to this FDA guy and they said, if you write an approval for us, it's a government stamp on the safety of our drug. And
good things could happen.
And we'll wait a year, and then we'll give you a sweet job for $300,000 a year.
Yeah,
which is what happened.
Yep.
So
but they waited a year, Kurt.
Yeah. So they essentially paid off this government employee to write on the label that it was safe when it wasn't safe, and then that started the whole thing.
Yep.
And
he goes from, I mean, that's part of the discrepancy, right? Because an FDA job pays what, 80 grand maybe,
right?
You know?
And so this documentary really vilifies the capitalists, which I find to be fine, but you've got to pile on 10 times more, 100 times more of your vilification of the government. The government is for the people.
Yep.
And we forget that because they're not often for the people.
Yeah.
They are our elected officials. They're supposed to be watching out for us. They are supposed to be not biased towards corporations. They're supposed to be biased towards the people. They're supposed to say, we have a problem here. Maybe we should bolster the FDA, give them some power, the DEA or someone power.
And we should not push for bills that
limit that
their
power.
Ability.
Because we're getting, and everyone around us are getting paid by Big Pharma, and we're putting our kids through college.
Yeah.
And that's the definition of corruption right there. And 500,000 and counting dead because of that.
Yeah. It's the crime of the century.
Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.